Okay, we're going to continue. Please join me. Hello. I kindly ask you to take your seats, please. Well, please join me in welcoming Mr. Gabriel Acevedo, Chief of the Amazonian Unit at the IDB Group. He will moderate our next panel. Please, you have the floor, Gabriel.
Thank you, everyone. I know the coffee is good, but we have an interesting conversation ahead of us, so I will ask the organization to close the doors so we can start. And I have the pleasure and the honor to invite our panelists, Ana, Paulo, and Marcelino, to join me here on stage so we can start our conversation. I'll give you another minute for people to settle in. But I guess we can start framing the discussion today. As we know, the global race for critical minerals will reward the regions that can scale up supplies with confidence. And when we talk about confidence, we talk about confidence in the policy framework, in the rule of law, on execution, on sustainability. Our region, Latin America and the Caribbean, has the resources. Today, with this fantastic panel, we'll explore whether it has the conditions to be a leader in the race and generate growth to its economy and value to its people. The International Energy Agency projects that demand for critical minerals and rare earths can be raised or can grow sixfold by 2040. We know that this is a topic that it is at the center today of geopolitical discussions. Just to illustrate, when we talk about Latin America, Brazil holds over 90% of the reserves and production of niobium. And it has the second largest reserves in rare earth. Argentina, Chile, and Bolivia combined have over 60% of the reserves of lithium. Chile, Peru, and Mexico combined have about 50% of the reserves of copper. This is just to illustrate how Latin America and its natural wealth can help the region position itself as a solution hub in this race for critical minerals and rare earths. There are also very significant reserves still not fully documented here in the Caribbean, in many of the islands, but it is known that those reserves exist. So the challenge that we have now is how to incorporate the lessons that we've learned from the past in guiding future decisions so that the region can capture the most value from its natural wealth, including technology and the development of well-established supply chains to bring prosperity to its people. To start our panel, I will ask each one of our panelists to take 2 minutes to introduce themselves and to add a brief reflection on how the Caribbean and Latin America can become relevant players and compete in this race. In other words, what would it take to Latin America and the Caribbean to be seen as the world's most reliable source of responsibly produced critical minerals? I will start with Ana. On the other hand, welcome, Ana. Please introduce yourself. And
Good morning, Gabriel.
We go in order.
Thank you for the opportunity to participate in this important panel. I think having mining being part of the discussion now that we're talking about sustainable development is pretty relevant. My name is Ana Milena Vázquez. I'm the Director of Exploration for Freeport-McMoRan. Freeport-McMoRan is a global leader on copper production. We are producing right now around 9% of the world's copper production. And Freeport entered Colombia 2 years ago with the goal of exploring for copper, of discovering the next world-class copper deposit in Colombia. About Latin America, what can I tell you? Latin America and the Caribbean region, definitely we can be a global leader in the reliable source of the production of critical minerals. We have the geology, we have the mineral endowment, which is the most important element that we need to have. But that's not all that we need. Investors and customers are looking for predictability. Investors are also looking for those companies and projects that can have trusted partnerships with communities to avoid delays, to avoid a social conflict, and to be able to guarantee the long-term value of those projects. So I will leave it like that, just
Thank
for
you,
the
Ana.
introduction.
Marcelino?
Thank you, and thank you, Gabriel and IDB Invest for the invitation. My name is Marcelino Madrigal. I lead the energy division and mining team at the IDB public sector side. So you might be saying, why is the IDB public sector here? Especially in mining, we need to work together to create precisely what Ana was saying, those enabling conditions for private markets to flourish in the energy and the mining sector. Energy and mining go hand in hand, and what we do in the IDB public sector side is support our governments on creating those conditions for competitive markets to flourish both in the energy and the mining sector. We also provide catalytical public infrastructure that is required for those markets to function. And then with IDB Invest, our colleagues from energy infrastructure and corporate divisions, we then close the loop to bring those financial products for private companies to compete in those markets that we are supporting to create. And as you said rightly, Latin America is really a powerhouse of mining. There are many challenges, but more opportunities than challenges in mining. What it will take for the region to become even more important globally in mining, I think is not one single thing, but I will put it as if we find a way to convert all that wealth underground on wealth above ground for investors, for communities, for the environment, and for the economy as a whole, if we take that premise very seriously, I think the region can really become more powerful than it is already globally in supplying minerals to the world.
Thank you, Marcelino. Paulo?
Thank you, Gabriel, and good morning, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me. So my name is Paulo Castellari. I have been in the mining sector for just under 35 years. I started, I was 6, so just for the record. I have more or less spent half of that period in Latin American countries, in Chile, Argentina, Venezuela, Peru, and have been working in many different sectors within the mining world. Since 2019, I joined Appian. Appian Capital is today the largest private equity fund focused in mining. So it's a very interesting mixture of an operator and a capital provider, capital solutions provider. More recently, I've been given the task, the mission to help the team build a larger, more substantial critical minerals portfolio. Right now, we have 2 strategies one on graphite, one on rare earths and mineral sands, and we're looking to expand. What I think, I have the easy job, right, from Ana Milena and Marcelino, but to me, geology is a gift, right? So everyone in this room have heard in many different ways. We read the same documents. There's plenty of potential, plenty of natural resources in Latin America. That is a given. This is a gift. What I would like to see more and more is us focusing on getting the region execution ready. So again, execution sorry, geology is a gift, but execution is really the talent. So these are the controllable factors. And again, now it's time to really focus on what is it that we can do to make a difference going forward.
Thank you, Paulo. Great way to kickstart our conversation. And I want to thank again our panelists. I think them being here to talk to us, Ana came from Bogota, Marcelino from DC, and Paulo is based in Dubai, I think illustrate the importance and the connections that can be generated here during Sustainability Week. And I think the message, even though my question was if, I don't think the message here is if Latin America and the Caribbean is going to be an important player in this game. It is already an important player. The question is, will it be able to maximize the benefits of the geology gift that it received or it has? I think that's the critical question. And with respect to that, going back to our panelists, I would like to ask Paulo, who brings a very interesting perspective from someone who was an operator but also a capital provider and investor, on your decision, Paulo, to make an investment. What signals tell you that a country or a project team can execute predictably and at a scale what you're looking at?
Okay. Thank you, Gabriel. So, look, I think three main things come to mind, reflecting on this point. I think first looking at the team, looking at the depth, technical knowledge, but more importantly on the values of the team, because at the end, the team is the group of people that will be on the ground wearing your shirt and actually representing your brand. So oftentimes people focus on the CV of the CEO and the work that the company has done in different regions, in different projects. But to me, the first indicator is really around the team on the ground. When we go around, Gabriel, looking at due diligence projects, associations that we want to invest money, it's where we start. Looking at how the team, how technically well-based the team is, and as well as the values and the drivers. The second group would be around, of course, governments, right? Local, state, federal, depending on jurisdiction that you are. It's really around government stance towards mining. I mean, does this government look at mining as a sector or look at mining as a constituency? And what I mean by that is, how serious are these governments, regional, again, depending on the jurisdiction, how long-term are they? How is it that they see mining codes changing, yes or no? So again, if governments look at mining as a sector, that's a very important indication. And what I mean by that is around stability, around playing the rules and clarity. And the last one, it's probably the toughest one, and that is around making sure that everything that's related, that everything that's non-mining is resolved before decisions of investment are made. And what I mean by that is, are we sure that we have all the permits? Are we sure that communities have been consulted? Are we sure that commitments that we've made to communities and other stakeholder players are actually firm and defined and agreed? Oftentimes, for different reasons, be it because of the capital markets pressure, be it because analysts look for quarterly results, be what it may, reality is that oftentimes projects advance without these so-called non-mining issues are not resolved. So making sure that the team has the right capability and the right values so that we can do safe and responsible operations on the ground continuously. The second one around the government's stance towards the sector, bringing stability, as Ana Milena mentioned. And then finally, this thing about making sure that projects advance only when everything around infrastructure, stakeholder engagement commitments, and what is required from the stakeholder groups is actually met. So these are the three things we look at.
Excellent. I think your 3 points provide me with a great follow-up to Marcelino's question that I had. Marcelino, you have this very unique perspective on policy and projects and public sector and the private sector. And listening to the three factors that Paulo said, what do you think are perhaps the most challenging conditions that we have in our region as a whole Is it related to logistics, to governance, permitting, conflict, that would have to be overcome to allow us to really scale up and extract the most value?
Thank you, Gabriel. And when you hear from someone like Paulo, who is moving the resources, telling you what is really the issues, it resonates very well with what we're doing at the IDB group. But just wanted to step back just for a second. Latin America and the Caribbean has the largest pipeline of mining projects in the world, $150 billion. So only followed by the US and Canada combined. So that is telling us something, that we have historically been a reliable source because of the geology, but because of the expertise we have, come up to build up in Latin America. Of course, all those 150 billion projects will not happen likely, but the world will need more than those because the world is highly electrifying, artificial intelligence is accelerating, more minerals and more diversified value chains are going to be required. So we as a region that happens to be, that have that credible track record, how do we position ourselves to become, attractive globally? So I think definitely you need those partnerships at the mining level to happen at the federal level and also at the global level. Let me explain. Paulo said, I need to work with the community so that the non-mining issues are resolved. I need to have the right operator and I need to have the right government, frameworks for me to operate so that that framework, that collaboration, partnership between communities, the mining companies, and the government is critical. So those are three axes. And when I said, how do you convert the wealth underground to wealth above ground, then in reality, you have to bring those partnerships, higher up. And this is why we at the IDB decided to launch IDB Lac Mineral, which is an IDB group, IDB and IDB Invest initiative to precisely become that partner in the region to tackle the challenges of developing mining. And that goes along three axes. Governments, the right policy framework, the right policy framework at the federal level, taxing, the right environmental and social permitting. This is not about reducing the standards, it's about being more effective, complying with the standards. Second, mobilizing capital so that investors that come to the region through IDB Invest understand what are really the risks on operating in different countries. And then last, mining needs infrastructure to operate, needs roads, needs electricity, needs water. And this is what we bring at the IDB public sector side. And in addition, the region, and that's part of the third axis of how we operate under IDB Lac Minerals, the region needs to start adding more value to minerals. Investors out there globally are willing to price the diversification value of having minerals or concentrates or refined products that come from a different region. So Latin America there has a big opportunity, is a challenge. So sadly, as complex problems, it's not one single thing, but as I said, the goal of tackling governance issues, financing issues, and infrastructure and value-added creation needs to be always driven by that objective that I said before. Let's make sure the wealth underground becomes wealth above ground for all the actors. So I think that's the sort of the positioning that we are trying to focus, to be focused in the IDB, becoming that bridge between communities, local investors, but also with the global, investors in the world.
Thank you, Marcelino. And Ana Milena, my question to you is very similar to what we heard from Marcelino and from Paulo in terms of what's critical for you from an operator standpoint. You just told us that Freeport is in Colombia, considering expansion of copper mining in Colombia, and I'm sure you encounter all these challenges, but you see an opportunity on doing it, right? And at the same time that we see Freeport and other mining companies coming to Latin America, over the past few years, investment in exploration has actually declined. Now it's picking up again, but it's actually declined. From an operator standpoint, What's your take on this? What are the issues that you're concerned with, and what is your approach to addressing those issues?
Well, let me first start by giving a little bit of context why exploration is so important. You mentioned 6 times that the demand of copper is going to increase 6 times. That's the number that you gave. Depending on the source, it would be 2 times, 3 times the amount of copper that we are producing today. That means that for the carbonization purposes, we will need definitely more copper. For the energy transition, we will need more copper. But the problem is that there is we're having issues discovering new copper deposits. So let me give you some numbers, some indicators to just put this into perspective. In the decades of the 90s, we were discovering copper deposits at a rate of 11.5 new discoveries per year. The last decade, that went down to less than 1 discovery per year. I'm talking about Tier 1 and Tier 2 deposits, of course. Additional to that, the grades of those discoveries have been also going down. 30 years ago, the grades were around 0.5% of copper per ton of ore. Today, we are around 0.2 or less than that. So grades are also declining. Additional to that, we have another problem is that all the production, the current production that we are seeing today and the new discoveries are deeper down. That means that it's more difficult, more costly, more expensive to find to produce copper, to produce 1 pound of copper. So if we add to that difficulties, to that context, we add the different barriers that we are seeing, especially here in Latin America, so we are not going to be able to meet that demand. Which are those barriers that we're finding? First of all, long and complex permitting processes, sometimes lack of coordination between the different agencies. That's what we are seeing in most of the countries. And something additional to that is that when talking about the exploration, sometimes the authorities do not understand the nature of the activity. And they think that exploration is the same as mining, and they are 2 different things with 2 different impacts. In exploration, I would say that the impact is very low or almost 0, while in an operation, things are different. You need to manage more risks. So that's the first thing, to understand that governments and authorities understand that we need a more not flexible. I would say that we don't want to lower the standards. What we want is speed. And speed not necessarily means that we need to lower the standards. We just need clarity and be able to have more coordination between agencies. Now, the second thing is stability. And this is super, super important because in mining, you need long-term vision. You need long-term stability. A project in copper, can take from exploration to development around, depending on the country, of course, but between 22 to 30 years. So that's a long time. So you need stability. You need predictability, again, to be able to advance on those projects and for Latin America, to attract those capitals that are risky capitals, basically. So, and the third thing that I think is a barrier and is not in the hands of the government, of course, not entirely, it's social conflict. We are seeing that, beautiful projects with beautiful geology, the highest potential to continue growing without, no green light because of social conflict. Because one of the main mistakes that some companies might do is to avoid early engagement with communities. And that's the key for me, definitely, to avoid disruptions, to avoid risk at the social level. It's important to engage at an early stage, at the exploration stage. I don't know if I answered your question.
No, great. Thank you so much, Ana Milena. And I think a lot of this resonates with us also, work we do at IDB and IDB Invest, and your point on early engagement and the point that I think it's similar to what Paulo made when he said non-money issue needs to be resolved to give investors and operators a higher level of confidence. With that, I'll go back to Marcelino and ask Marcelino, if we could point out two policy moves that we think would most improve long-term investors' confidence without weakening safeguards. What do you think those policy moves would be?
Mm-hmm. I definitely think there is room to improve, as we call it, like permitting without lowering the bar. There are definitely ways to do it. I'm going to give you an example. We work with the province of Salta in Argentina to basically digitalize, modernize of the permitting process for lithium mines. We were able to reduce the permitting time in 40% without lowering the bar, just digitalizing. These are things that happen at the local level where, local municipality institutions, they don't have all the necessary tools, the training and the technical capabilities to review, in a good way, all those documents, but in a more efficient manner. So you can definitely speed up the processes without lowering the bar. Actually, you could actually raise the bar, because that's very important, that we shouldn't make a run for more flexible ESG approaches. We should all try to up the bar in Latin America, because it can be done. So that's very important. Also engage very early with the communities, and we have very good examples on how we at the IDB work with private companies, with the communities, and with the local government to develop those infrastructure plans so that the community sees that value when the mines come to operate. So really doubling down on improving ESG standards, permitting, and execution, I think is critical. And the second, which it may sound not intuitive, invest in geology. Really, with new minerals, with rare earths, there is a value proposition now for governments to improve the capability of their geological institutions to understand more what is that new mineral region to develop. Because if you plan well, you may even find yourself in a better position to manage all the ESG aspects. So with these new minerals, government really need to invest on geological knowledge to reduce the risk of resource availability, but also to have better plans on how you are going to manage ESG. And we're working, for example, right now with the Dominican Republic to increase that knowledge, geological knowledge on rare earths, because there is mining in the Caribbean. It's very important to say that. Also, we're working with the government of Ecuador to improve its resource knowledge, and also with the government of Brazil. These new minerals, these new rare earths require governments to have that information so that you plan what is the next wave of development. So I would say that, and partnerships, and I mean global partnerships to diversify value chains. Latin America should work with off-takers in Europe, in the US, and in other countries to price the value of diversification. We need to increase added value, not just to export the copper, but why don't we refine it in the region? There is refining in Latin America. There was more refining some years ago. How do we make it competitive? And that will require international partnerships that are willing to price a premium for having diversified supplies from sustainable, well-developed mines in Latin America. So I would say those two moves improve ESG management, and second, think very seriously about adding value to mining in the region.
Excellent. And I like the point you made on the example in Argentina in which technology is playing a role. Paulo, going back to you, because we heard very interesting perspectives. From an investor perspective, what moves the needle in terms of investor interest and or cost of capital for these projects, and what still gets discounted as nice to have? In other words, what is on your decision structure a must-have versus nice-to-haves?
No, thank you, Gabriel. I think perhaps to contextualize the relevance of cost of capital, right? I think you mentioned, and we mentioned here as well, that many of these critical minerals are now in dominance by other regions, right? Regions that actually enjoy much lower cost of capital than we do. So this is just really to put in perspective the relevance of cost capital. Ana Milena mentioned that it takes 20 plus years to develop a mine. There's a lot of capital involved, and thus the cost of capital is that relevant. The way we look at it, we look at the 3 T's, right? We look at time, so time to execute safely, responsibly, in time, in budget. I mean, we've all read these different stats, but the one that really stick with me is that 70% of the capital projects in mining are at least 50% late. So this is how important time it is, and also on my previous comment around the dominance of certain regions in certain sectors of the critical mineral space, time to market, it's absolutely crucial. So if you can prove that you have the ability to deliver on time, in budget, safely, responsibly, that is definitely a big one to move the needle on cost of capital. The second T is tonnage. In my opinion, it's about delivery, right? Again, we already talked about reserves and resources, how great our resources are. We know that many people in certain areas, in certain capital markets, promote their reserves and resources, but not necessarily focus on tonnage. So for me, it's absolutely crucial, and at Appian we look at that a lot, because not only we invest our own capital, but we also lend capital to other players. So we definitely look at tonnage as in terms of the ability to deliver product, right? Rather than just having lots of resources on the ground to be developed. It's a great promise and all this sort of stuff. The third T is trust, right? It's around track record, is around, we mentioned in the first question you asked me, the ability that the team has actually to deliver the project, what the team has delivered in the past. And it's unbelievable every time that we speak with other capital providers, because we often make a mixture of our own capital as well as external capital. It's always the same, about the first questions that we asked is about track record, who is the team, how long the team has been there. So it's really the trust factor, the tonnage, and the time to market.
Thank you so much. Going back to Ana Milena. Ana, from your operator's perspective, we've heard a lot of things that multilaterals can and are doing, that governments can do, but within this whole complex structure of hearing from investors, and what can you do? How do operators face these challenges, and what are they doing to address those challenges within their control structure?
Okay, sustainability has become not a nice to have, but part of the core strategy of the companies. So yes, we cannot maybe influence how stability agreements should be done in a country. That's under the control of the governments. But from our point of view, we can adhere to the highest standards and best practices available in the industry. And that's what we do. Why? Because that's the way to manage risk, but also to protect the long-term value of the project, of the company. So in the case of Freeport, for example, we are founding members of ICMM. ICMM is the International Council of Metals and Minerals. And we have certain principles to manage different areas of risk in the projects, from water management, tailings, biodiversity, community engagement, gender and diversity, etc., etc. And if we apply those highest standards, you can avoid disruptions, you can protect, as I mentioned before, the long-term value of the company. When you are working on exploration, and I also mentioned this before, but I'm going to emphasize a lot on this, is that we need to build trust from day zero, because early engagement with communities is the only possibility that we can have to guarantee the long term of a project. So this is pretty important. I've been also working on sustainability in the exploration projects that I have been working for, and according to my experience, that's one of the key elements to guarantee that no disruptions are going to avoid the advance of the project. That's what we can do from the sustainability point of view, from the private sector point of view.
Thank you, Anna. We are pressed by time, but just following the same pattern of my predecessors, here's the man with the money, here's the other man with the money, here's the lady with a lot of experience and knowledge. I'm not in the mining. I'm here filling in for Ana Margarida Trujillo, the mining leader head of IDB Invest, but I have her email, so you can talk to me, or with Rodrigo Navas over there on the second row, and he can give you her email. I think, although I've heard about the challenges, I leave this panel with an optimistic view. And what I would like to do is to optimism about the potential, optimism about what the region can do, optimism where that we can overcome challenges and develop a brighter future for the region. And mining is going to be an important part of that, especially on the critical minerals space. Why don't we take 1 or 2 minutes to hear a final reflection from each of the panelists before we close? I think we could start with Paulo and then go towards Ana Milena. Paulo?
Thank you, Gabriel. So we were chatting just before the panel started about flights and the fact that many of us had our flights changed and this and that. So the analogy that I would like to put here is that we in the region, we have our passports, right? And the passport is issued. What we need to think about, it's where the tickets are going to be booked. So imagine that we're ready to take our flights, we need to make sure that everything is right, but the passport, which is typically the most difficult thing to get, we have, right? And what I really wish is that we start focusing on the fact that, yes, of course, we have lots of resources, we have the capabilities, this is all done and well established in the industry, everyone knows that. I think what we need to work towards is really make sure that the markets in general understand that we in Latin America and the Caribbean can be the one that is the best possible investment opportunity when it comes to readiness, right? So readiness rather than cost, rather than potential, being ready to be sure that we can execute. So to me, execution ready has to be the thing that we need to focus forward.
Great. Readiness and execution, two great words for this panel. Marcelino?
Yes, I would say to the audience, please see the IDB as a bridge at different levels between the mining companies in the terrain, local communities and governments, but also as a bridge between the region and the world. We can be that player that works with the governments to create that enabling environment for investment to flow, but we can also, through IDB Invest, bring the financing. And I would like to thank here Guillermo Foscarini and Margarita. We work very well, both public and private sector sides. They have a very interesting pipeline of projects, lithium, copper in Argentina, in Brazil, rare earth. So look at the IDB as that partner to develop responsible mining in the region and take advantage of our new platforms, IDB, Black Minerals.
Great partnership and the IDB group. And Ana Margarita?
Ana Milena.
Ana Milena, I was thinking about our mining head
Yes.
because I had to mention her name. Thank you, Ana.
Just to finalize, just to mention again that there's, with no exploration, there's no mining tomorrow. If we are really serious about meeting the demand of critical minerals in 15, 20 years, in the following 2 decades, we need to explore today. And to explore, definitely, Latin America has a huge potential, geologically talking. We have this beautiful Andean copper belt that starts in Chile and ends in Panama. There are still countries that are underexplored, not unexplored, underexplored, and with huge potential. 6 out of the 10 most important or large-scale, world-class copper deposits are there in that copper belt. So there's no reason why we couldn't find in Colombia or Ecuador or Panama the next big discoveries. Now, that's nature. Nature is a gift, as you said, Paulo. But we need to work on other things. On decreasing social conflict, early engagement, important, and finally, having the support on the permitting process, having the support from the governments, making predictability and more stable regulatory frameworks. That's how I would close this conversation.
Fantastic, and I think I would summarize Ana Milena's point as knowledge, because I was talking to someone about this panel, before the panel, about my own country, Brazil, and she was telling me that only a small fraction of Brazil is actually explored in the sense of knowing. So there's vast areas in our region that we don't know what's in there, and being able to use technology and determine where those resources may be also is critical. So readiness, partnerships, knowledge, I think, are some key words to wrap up this panel. I want, again, to thank our panelists who took the time to share the experience with us, and all of you, and looking forward to our next panel. Please do not leave the room unless you have to. There will be a continuation of very interesting conversations here. Thank you.